Hello everyone, my name is Norris Lin. In this design tutorial, I'm going to talk about architecture design with a specific story setting. So today my design subject will be a post-apocalyptic base building. Here are some examples of it. The first two images you see here are from the game Fallout 4. In the game, you can find usable materials and then you can use those materials to construct your own customized buildings. And then the third image here, it's a movie design. It's a set design for a movie called Water World back in 1995. So those are the aesthetic I wanna include in my design. You know, using whatever material you can find, mostly metal, and construct the building with the limitation of those materials. And for the world setting and design context, here are two examples of the apocalypse situation from two of the movie. One is, in the Mad Max movie, there's no water, or there's very limited water for people to share. So people are hungry, starving, and thirsty. Whoever control the water control the world. But in the water world, it's like a reverse idea of the Mad Max, which is there's no land in the world. Everyone construct their building on top of an ocean. So very interesting setting, because even the ocean is a gigantic water, but it's not a drinkable water. So people would also need to find a way to purify the water in order to survive in the world. So you can see here, like every apocalypse or apocalyptic genre film or movie or game setting has their specific elements to make the world interesting. And in here, I want to give myself a setting as well. My setting would be, what if the earth is covered with hazardous ground or some kind of toxic pollution water everywhere? And therefore, my buildings, they all need to have this stealth construction, to prevent the ground threats. Or it could be some kind of creatures crawling around, or it could be some kind of poisonous liquid on the ground level. So everything needs to be built higher up with this stilted construction with giant being, either it could be a metal or wood beings going through the buildings. And here are some other examples of just showing like maybe it's from humans pollution make the water poisonous. And for another strict rule is my major construction material would be a wrecked ship as my building materials. I think the reason why I picked this specific element is because I feel like I like how flexible like this material is. Like, I feel like I can bend or reforming this material to create whatever interesting form I want to design. I also like this, kind of framing support of this specific reference, because it gives some nice negative space I can also play around with in my designs. And maybe some other materials to contract the metal, which in this case, this image you see here is a wooden wrecked ship. And this is another aesthetic I want to create, like see like those people, they would just use whatever metal panel they find, and they would just put on top of their buildings randomly and create a nice variety of color and texture. So this is a simple design context before I even do the design, because every time you need to have some certain of context or rules for you before you do the drawings, because without those it's not design, it's just you randomly scribbling stuff that's not in the right direction or not in their specific direction, and that's not design. Okay, so after we decide like our design context, there's another thing I want to apply into my design, which is a foreign language idea. What's a foreign language? Like, foreign language is a subject, any subject you pick, you find that has an interesting content or visual language to it that's really inspire you, and then you could really use this certain type of visual language and apply into your design. But before we do that, we need to analyze this foreign language and extract some of the unique elements and then apply into our design. In here, for example, I'm choosing an eggshell as my foreign language, and it's gonna be a cracked one in particular. And why? I feel like there's no specific reason. As long as you feel like this form could add another interesting layer into your design, then you can just use it. And the first thing we need to do here is to, from observation, we need to list down a bunch of keywords for us to visualize it. In this case, here are some keywords I generate by just observation to observe this cracked eggshell. And there is no right or wrong with the keywords you come up with, as long as it's something that you see and that you feel that this foreign language has. In here, I have a list down of some keywords, and right now I'm going to describe or visualize those keywords by just doing simple drawings. The first one is stacking, because you can see like here the actual, it's broken and it's piece by piece, and I feel like it has some kind of a stacking language to it. So what's the simplest way to describe or visualize a stacking? I mean, the most simple is just draw a bunch of shapes, and they are doing like this kind of action, which is stacking. It's very straightforward. And with this eggshell, or from this supporting reference you see here, is from the stacking keyword. With also the eggshell form language, I just found this interesting sculpture by an artist who made, and has this stacking quality to it. You can really, just by simple drawing and play around with ideas, and sometimes this is a great way to exercise, to warm up your hands before you draw the actual design. Right now I'm just literally doing like a stacked eggshell. So maybe this would be an interesting idea you can apply into your design. So the second keyword is cracked. So from the eggshell, by observation, you can see it's a cracking egg, but how the crack reveal is, it's like doing this kind of organic feel that I can try to also visualize it by just practice this thing. So cracking is usually form A and form B, but two forms used to be one piece, but when it cracks, it creates this, one is like positive and the other one is a negative shape. And there could be potentially an interesting visual elements you might also want to apply into your design as well. So the third one would be welded or glued. Like, because from just this image, I feel like these things is broken, but it still stick together. And then with my supporting reference, this artist using a cracked eggshell, and then he or she would glue together and to forming another interesting forms. And there will be another interesting idea we can play around. So glued would be just literally two pieces piecing together, Again, it could be our metal parts that when you construct the building, you just weld it or glue all the pieces together. Or either you can put, imagine this how like metal pieces, you can just put the bolts to make it stronger. So what about hollow? Right, from this eggshell, from observation again, I see like some hollow space, hollow shapes. There is nothing inside. And this is a great things we can also explore. Like, imagine there's a form with holes, you know, and creating this hollow negative space with interesting contrast. Would be another fun element we can include. So next one, the hole is they are very similar. So based on this sketch, we can just describe it already. What about a gap? It's actually very similar to like those two. But usually a gap is like when there's two pieces, maybe like two giant stones. When they put together, there's a negative space again, which creating a gap. Or two doors. Maybe it's not sealed well enough. So there is a gap. But I mean, this will be boring because it's just a straight line. Or maybe when we play around with what if the door is somehow broken, and we can really play around with this interesting gaps in our design. Supports, very simple. Support is something that's on the top. We're just putting like stuff on the bottom to make it stand or to make it unfold. Support being stuff like that. And why I come up with support keyword from the Excel? Because again, I feel like this egg yolk supposed to be inside, and then this actually support or protect whatever is inside. What about surrounded? So from the eggshell, got this kind of nice gesture of surrounding. It's a round shape. So when you crack into two pieces, and when you position these two pieces like this, kind of create some kind of surrounded language to it. So in our keyword description, we can just, maybe there's something in the middle, pretty simple thing, and just this something, maybe just a crack eggshell that is surrounded these middle pieces. So you can just draw a circle. You say like these things are surrounded. With this middle element. What about rapid? It's very similar to surrounded, but it's more like, again, another cylinder. And there's something that's wrapped around this, you know, structure. Maybe a bandage. Or maybe it could be, you know, eggshell like metal piece. So imagine this could be our building, and we would just use these kind of elements to wrap around my main structure. It's pretty much like, you know, this surrounded or wrap around feel I found from those art pieces. Maybe I can put another one on the top. However you want to arrange it. Larger one. And already this is already creating an interesting language. Put another one at the bottom. Balance. So balance, it's from when I see this image, this 2x sitting here, it sits still, but it's not just a stiff, you know, position. It's actually angled toward facing here, but why it's because the weight distribution is even, so it's sitting like interesting like this, even in this. So with the balance description drawing, you know, the most simple way to do it is do the scale thing. You know, this thing is heavy. It's heavier than this one. But when you longer the beam, you will reach that balance level. And creating some kind of interesting visual language. And that's pretty much some basic keywords we can come up with from this actual form language. And the next, we will, you know, within those keywords, we're trying to pick 1 or 2, not too much, keywords, and then apply into our design. So it's really up to you what to pick, as long as you feel like those could be to give you an interesting opportunity to put into your design. For here in my case, I want to do hello, because I really like this kind of feel with some, negative space we can play around. And also the other one I want to do is stacking, because I know my structure we're building upward to stay away from those hazardous water. So I feel like my building will be stacking a lot. Something like this. So Eggshell is my phone language. What about supporting reference is, based on this cracked Eggshell, I feel I need more interesting visual similar to this kind of quality. So I just went ahead and expand my reference, and I find those would potentially be some interesting inspiration too for me to apply into my design. I really like this one with, it's either hollow or broken with negative space that I really want to play around with within my designs. And this, within this broken part, there are some nice broken transition into like the still like nice piece here, and it's gonna create a nice gradation and transition for the form turning. So yeah, let's actually move on to the design drawing. So in here, I'm gonna show you guys how do I generate ideation sketch based on the context, the design setting on our previous video. So right now I'm using lines to find out interesting forms, because I know these buildings are gonna build higher up, building upward to stay away the hazardous ground. So I'm mixing some like thinner line and thicker line. So benefit of like mixing different line stroke gives you some kind of a line weight or shadow. Because really right now I'm looking for that nice positive and negative space contrast. Because I imagine that the eggshell protective metal panel could be brighter color that contrast the darker tone of the hollow space. So you can see me like I have created a, the overall form of the structure and start adding the pieces on top, just like what we have planned earlier. And also I'm looking for structure built toward different spaces, toward the front, toward the part, toward the top, toward the side, to give it a nicer, volume in space. Currently trying to add some type of stilt construction to support that bridge-like part. And right now I'll show you is a real-time sketch. And then usually for each ideation sketch, I wouldn't spend more than 15 minutes. Because really, right now the most important part just to putting down some note or like the initial thoughts in your mind as quickly as possible. And we don't want to go detail for now. We just want to go get the overall structure. And you can see me like just mixing painting, drawing, and some erasing to create like very simple light and shadow with some lines. I think this is my favorite way to do the sketch. And of course, there's no specific way to do the sketch because you can just purely just using line with one line thickness, or you can use, start with silhouette painting technique. But in my case, I want to mix lines and some larger stroke, and that gives me more flexibilities to quickly blocking in the forms. Trying to establish the ground level with some, again, some kind of pathway, some kind of stilt pathway toward the entrance of the building, kind of leading or guide the audience eye into the main structure. And the benefit of this rough sketch is it's easy, it's very forgivable to just erase or modify it without, feeling like you are losing the drawings you have spent for so long. So just stay loose, but keep in mind your design context You can see me right now. I just, again, you always need that reference you get there earlier. And sometimes it's easier, if you can put next to it to give it more ideas when you do the drawing. I mean, I usually have like 2 monitors. The first monitor will be just doing the design. The second monitor will be just my reference monitor. I would put a bunch of reference I need while I'm drawing. Just using some thinner line to indicate like the smaller scale detail. And again, like not really draw out all the component in very detail. I'm just using some kind of noise thinner line to indicate that those could be the area of something man-made. And right now I'm putting some shadow on the left side of the building, indicate that the lighting could be coming from top right 45-degree angle, which is the most efficient way to light your design. The brush I use is pretty good too. It's when you use larger stroke and then you just draw, put down your strokes slightly, it kind of create that kind of charcoal grayish tone rendering feel, which is a great way to quickly give some kind of shadow on your design. And right now you can see the picture, the designs already have some sort of eggshell cover or eggshell protective shell on top of the building. Feels like it's part of the rected chip material. There again, I think trying to put down some like organic terrain outline to suggest that this building is kind of on top of a small island, but surrounded with be like some kind of water, and then again more like docking area, docking stilt construction wood panel area where you can boat your boat, because I imagine like you travel around with boats, not not cars, because cars doesn't run on the water. I think this is pretty much our first sketches. I would just, move on to the next without thinking about too much, because I'm aiming for at least 5 sketches to try to put down like all the potential design, and after that we're gonna pick some of them and really refine it in color on the future video. So the second one, slightly different technique. Right now I'm just using purely opaque dark gray with no pen pressure, just trying to block it in into just silhouette without thinking about lighting. So you can see me like putting some kind of beam support, wooden beam support on the bottom, and then on the bottom there would be some kind of slightly land area. And then on top of that wood beam support would be again the eggshell inspired FormLanguage, kind of stacking toward the top with some, negative space, with some hollow space where people can gathering around like a balcony. You also you can see me like putting some darker tone and lighter tone to indicate some sort of lighting to describe the form better. But I can still keep it loose to get the overall energy. Still very easy to modify. Maybe for this one it's a larger top heavy structure with a giant roof that's covered on the top. And on the top you can do extended structure with some sort of, maybe it could be a water tower secondary structure that maybe somehow collect the rain. You can see me just start with like darker gray, putting shadow with even almost black value, and the lighter value for the lighting. So pretty much just 3 value sketch. It's good to keep it simple in the beginning, because when you go the range, the value range is too much, it's gonna be hard for you to simplify stuff. Because in the beginning you wanna simplify as much as you can, because later on when you put in details, it's gonna be more complex. We don't want things to get too complex in the beginning. Adding like some sort of secondary structure with like an eggshell reference we saw, but it could be potentially a rocket ship parts that collects and then serving some kind of structure. This one is kind of funky because it got this Pac-Man, open mouth feel. Putting some like hanging elements to suggest like people has been living here, and then they have customized this building. Put a scale always into your design. because without the scale it's easy to get lost, and the scale is always important. So moving on to the third sketch. Again, I'm picking darker gray, but this time with pen pressure. I always like to try different way of sketching and then see what's the different result I can get. And that way you can find the best way to do a certain type of design for yourself. But everyone is different always, but for me, I just like to explore different technique for different design. And kind of use putting a larger stroke and trying to find the overall feel. And for a low sketch, I don't really put down perspective guideline because I feel like the perspective guideline is gonna limit you a lot in the beginning if you have it, because usually when we do the 2-point perspective, it's like a giant box putting in the frame, and then everything you do will be limited into that space. So what I would do is to sketch those like what I'm doing right now, but after I have the rough sketch, I would put down the perspective guideline later and then just readjust whatever that doesn't follow into the space or perspective. And that way you can still keep the original like energy of the sketch, but also make sure the perspective is correct. And right now I am grabbing another reference on the page to show you guys that this is the key reference I am using for this particular design, like this surrounded from the bottom, kind of wrap around the building in the middle. And then those surrounded pieces from on the bottom could be just, the abandoned debris, metal debris on the ground. Putting some kind of like ground texture, ground label. Continually adding some different structure shape like this. Put some kind of a cylinder thing on the top. Thought it could be some kind of a giant torpedo engine of the ship or something like that. And for the aesthetic, I still want to keep it a little bit of like Memex feel, more like a little bit like not stylized, but crazier looking with a lot of like personality to it. Feels like it's a like a creature's mouth opening kind of vibe. This is pretty much my third sketch. Like spend about like 10 minutes for each currently. Alright, moving on to the next one. For this one, I want to do a top heavy but more like horizontal direction roofing. And you can see the reference on the bottom left. The second one, it's the key reference for this one with a top part and then the bottom part, but within that middle space is a negative space with some kind of giant support on it. But I imagine the building material again would be the ship, the abandoned ship. Somehow people just lifting the top part there. I don't know how, but I think it got that Memex like crazy vibe to it. And right now I'm carving some kind of halo, some kind of negative space, revealing the construction support framing part of the ship. Adding the middle beam, just like that key reference has. So right now we're using that key reference as an abstract FormLanguage inspiration, along with that eggshell FormLanguage idea with stacking and hello keywords, and really just inject those ideas into our design. But the design is based on our design context, which is post-apocalyptic setting. So it's like from abstraction to, realistic application. That's why you need real world reference. And also a purpose for it, right? Again, the top area will be showing more like the framing part, which is interesting. Can somehow that, negative space framing part on the top could potentially casting interesting light shadow pattern. So moving on to our fifth one. Don't really have a specific plan on this one. I'm just trying to do more of a profile view with two part of the structure, and then I'm trying to find a way to connect those two pieces. And for the bottom one, again, I'm using that ship constructor framing as a base. Continue looking for interesting forms within this sketch. Again, like still using that eggshell as overall form, but it's cracked. Within those cracked negative space area, I introducing some like rusty, broken wooden metal beams going through. And some kind of a water tower on the top. It's always to put a recognizable things that showing the scale of the entire design. Because if everything is too abstract, it's hard to relate the scale of the design. Okay, using like some larger painting stroke with erasing to achieve that negative form idea. Shadow goes on the bottom, maybe with some more cracking language on the bottom. More of that surrounded idea. Alright, let's move on the last one, the sixth one. Again, this one I am starting with some kind of support goes on the bottom. Larger main structure piece. Just doing a rough sketch and just quickly trying to find interesting arrangement of the structure. And always keep my mind to trying to introduce more of that negative space of that halo idea with the shell surrounded cover around the building. And everything is stacking, construct toward the top. So really that larger eggshell pieces serve as a lighter pattern with larger resting area, and then that support being structured, the stilt structure serve as a more busier like negative space area. So within those two contrasts, we can create some an interesting combination. Maybe that's a giant some kind of chimney connect to the side. Maybe this could be a factory or something. They were forging inside that building. Yeah, and these are all of my sketch. Just doing some kind of, the final editing. I feel like this piece could incorporate more like secondary structure connect to the sides. Could be some kind of oil rig. You see those oil rig on the ocean? And I don't zoom in too close, because if you zoom in too close, it's hard to see the overall design, which is very important because you don't want to spend a lot of time on specific detail but losing the overall shape. Because detail right now is not the most important part. The most important part to figure out the entire layout of the form and then how all the structure organized together. That's the thing I want to look for or finding on those rough sketches. And that's it for our 6th ideation sketch. So next thing I will do is within this 6th ideation sketch, I'm going to pick 3 of them, spending a little bit of time to finalize and prepare for the color painting. So the first one I will pick would be A. I like how this one has a lighter value of resting area, contrasting with this darker negative space. And I also like this, pathway going into different direction into the space. The second one I will pick is C, because I like how simple this thing is with a big, medium, and a small area. And the third one I would pick would be E, because within those two, E has different kind of movement or gesture, which is like this kind of form toward the top. So within those 3, each one would stand out more, and that's the 3 I'm going to do the refine detailing on the next. So while I'm spending a little bit more time on each of this selection, I will make sure first I will always look at your reference. For this example, I have collected some of the racket ship reference on the side. So while I am fixing some of this painting I can really using those references as a guideline for me to refine the design a little bit. This is not really a finished piece. This is just, you know, adding those stuff before I really moving into the finalized color painting. So the second one, feel like this one has a more stronger read. Because right now I feel like it's kind of missing the larger structure. Trying different way of recomposing the design. Maybe there are two watchtower thing. Just readjusting the scale a little bit. So I'm making a big change here. Lots of time, like, you know, when you draw down the first try, it doesn't means that's final. Like, always feel free to move around, erase whatever you can do to make the overall design better. And that's the purpose of rough sketch. You know, easier to change if you keep it loose. So I think this one has a little bit better gesture right now, like with the large surrounded upward structure with also with the middle smaller size, and on the top it's like some kind of a cover and it's smaller. So I'm doing it like I'm trying to reinforce the silhouette to make the overall silhouette as a shape. So later on when we do the color painting, we can just using clipping mask, clipping into the shape. That's pretty much it for the second refinement. Even make the thing taller, better gesture. Alright, so moving on to the third one. So on the third one, I'm trying to combine one of the piece from other ideation. You know, the good thing about the rough ideation, when you do a bunch, there are some good potential on each one, and then sometimes you can just rearrange, reuse the stuff you have been designed, and then recompose it, like mixing with some of the good ones into just one piece. And also on the professional job, when you do ideation sketch, say you do like 20 of them, and then when you show to your art director, it's good for him to pick and choose too, like, right? Like maybe he like the design A, and then but he also like the part of the design D, so he could easily just point out, oh, can we just use the design A but with mix some of the elements from design D? So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. So picking A, and I'm mixing like part of the design from design D. So you can see me right now like putting the perspective grid as a guideline for me to readjust the perspective. So this is how I would use perspective grid. I don't use in the beginning without any contents. I would use after I have the rough sketch, and then I would put down the design perspective grid, and then I will readjust the design. So it's a good way to still keeping that original energy of your sketch, but also making sure the perspective is in the right place. Again, I'm here just trying to setting up for my color painting, so everything should still be, you know, rough, not like highly detailed. It's just indicating stuff around, not really going into super detail. Hitting some kind of surrounded like structure. Again, always in my case, always refer to my form language, because that's the purpose of this design sketch. Like architecture, I'm basing on post-apocalyptic setting, but with the form language, which is my actual as inspirational form for my architecture. Again, so since we are not worrying about the color right now, so for the lightest part of the design, I would just leave it white. Feel like I can introduce some kind of framing on the roof, and always put a scale guide into your painting. So here is the conclusion of this architecture ideation design tutorial. On the first part, we have chosen post-apocalyptic base building as our design subject. And then we also discuss a little bit about Memex and the water world, about their apocalypse situation. And then we have giving ourselves a setting which is maybe the entire world is covered with some kind of hazardous ground or toxic pollution water. So our architecture RO has this stilted construction to prevent the threats on the ground. And we have also decided we want to use wrecked ship as our main building materials. And then some of the example of the real world metal shacks as our main design aesthetic. And then next, we also went through some of the basic FormLanguage application for our design subject. We have chosen an eggshell as our FormLanguage. We also break down some of the keywords we want to include into our design subject, which are staking and hello. So on the next part of the video, we do the actual design sketches and we generate 6 of the designs, mixing with some painting and drawing techniques with the application of our FormLanguage, which is eggshell. And within those 6 designs, we have chosen 3 of the designs, which are design A, C, and E. And for those 3 designs, we spent a little bit more time to make sure all the designs are on the right place before we move on to the color painting, which will be covered in the part 2 of this design tutorial. And this concludes all the stuff I want to cover in the part 1 video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and hopefully see you on the next part of the color painting stage.